Hello all, I Zatin welcomes you all to our YouTube channel A to Z Softtech. Here you will get educational videos related to NCRT subjects and technical subjects based on computer science. If you find our videos helpful to you, please like and share the videos, do subscribe the channel and hit the bell icon to get updates about new videos. To get more clarity on the topic, watch the video till the end. You can reach to us using our email, WhatsApp and Telegram channel. The link is provided in the description box below the video. You can find our video using hashtag Zatinsa, hashtag A to Z Softtech. Now, let's start with the topic.
So first of all, microprocessor and history. The term microprocessor was developed by Intel in 1971. Intel is a company which developed the microprocessor. Intel stands for Integrated Electronics. INT stands for Integrated and EL stands for Electronics. And in 1971, the first microprocessor was developed and Intel named it as 4004. Its name is 4004. It is a 4-bit processor. What is the meaning of 4-bit processor? It takes 4 bits and it can process 4 bits. The addressing is up to 4 bits only. Okay, but this is not much popular. Why? Because it is a very initial range of microprocessor. Intel 4004 was able to perform only addition subtraction operation on 4-bit at once, as it is the very first processor and it can process only 4-bit. After 4004, Intel launched 8080 in 1974. Means after 3 years, first was developed in 71, then 74. After 3 years, Intel developed another processor which is 8080. It is an 8-bit processor. Earlier was 4-bit, that's why its number starting from 4, and now it is 8-bit processor, so its number is starting with 8. 2 years later, Intel designed 8085. Now, this is the processor which we will discuss in detail, that is 8085. This processor is famous processor of 8-bit which is developed by Intel. Earlier, 4-bit processor was not successful. Moreover, the 8080 processor, which is the first 8-bit processor, it is also not much popular. But 8085 becomes very popular as it is able to perform so many operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on. We will do the programming of these as well. Now, this 8080 microprocessor was not the new invention because earlier 8080 is already invented, but it is the updated version of 8080. Okay, so 8080 is the older version and 8085 is the updated version of old processor. In 8085, there are two enable and disable instructions. Enable and disable instructions, 3 interrupt pins, and some serial IO pins. You all know about interrupt, about serial IO. We have already discussed this is this in the computer architecture. Later, in the same year, Intel announced a new processor. This is a new. This is not the updated. This is a new. So, if we talk about the series 8008, starting 4004, 4-bit, then later on 8085 and 8086. This is 4-bit and these are 8-bit. This is of 16-bit. So 8086 processor is better to 8085 because it is based on 16-bit. Now what is the 16-bit? This is the processor capacity. Means it can work on 16-bit data. It can work on 16-bit data. These two can work on 8-bit data and this can work on 4-bit data. Okay. The microprocessors were not supportable for floating point instructions. Floating point means जिसमें आपके पास decimal आता है 456.23. This is a floating point instruction. In this decimal is here. This decimal can be moved here or there. Okay, you all have already studied about floating point instructions. Later, Intel designed a new processor, that is 8087. It is a coprocessor, or specifically we'll talk about math, the first math coprocessor, which works with another processor, which works as it is named as coprocessor, means it need one more processor and it can embed it into another processor. Means there are two processors. One is specifically for mathematical operations and another is for all different types of operations. So if we talk about the series, next is 8087. This is a math coprocessor. Continuing in this, some new processors came into the market like 8088, then 80286, 80386, 486. Now these processors belongs to 8086 family. 8086 family से belong करते हैं ये वाले processors. कौन से 80286, 386 and 486. After 486, the next will be 80586, and this is known as Pentium. This is known as Pentium 2, or we can say that 486 is the Pentium 1. Then Pentium 3, P3, P4, Core 2 Duo, Dual Core, Quad Core processors. These are the basic processors. After these quad core processor, we have Itanium series. Itanium series, जिसको आप I बोलते हैं ना, I3, I5, I7. So these series is known as Itanium series. We'll discuss this in detail in a few minutes. Now here some basic terms that used in microprocessor. First is instruction set. Instruction set is a group of commands that microprocessor can understand, is called instruction set. It is an interface between hardware and software. Like if I say sit down, then this is an instruction which you can understand, which I can understand. So such group of instructions known as instruction set. Next is bus. Bus is used for transmission of data, address and control information. Okay, bus which is used to travel or which is used for transportation of data is known as data bus, which is used for transportation of address is known as address bus, and which is used for transportation of control information is known as control bus. Data bus, address bus and control bus. Next is instructions per cycle. The instructions per cycle means cycle refers to the time, or we can say that per unit of time. To be very specifically, per unit of time. Maybe 1 minute, 1 second, 1 hour. Okay, means आप per unit क्या ले रहे हैं? Generally हम minute, second, hour नहीं, millisecond और microsecond की बात करते हैं. As microprocessor is very fast, so either talk about millisecond or microsecond. In general, micro is preferred. Okay, so one clock cycle, single clock cycle belongs to microseconds. So instructions per cycle means how many instructions of processor. CPU means central processing unit, or you can say that the processor only. How many instructions the processor capable of executing in a single clock means the time period. Clock cycle means the time period. This is a 1 microsecond. 1 microsecond means 10 raised to the power minus 6 seconds. So in 10 raised to the power minus 6 seconds, how many instructions will be executed? This is known as IPC, instructions per cycle. Next is clock speed. Clock speed. These two terms are interrelated. Clock speed is the number of operations per second. Number of operations per second the processor can perform. It can be expressed in megahertz or gigahertz. Mega means 10 raised to the power 6. Now, if we talk about 1 second, 10 raised to the power 6 operations is there. Okay, so one operation will be in the 10 raised to the power minus 6 seconds, means microsecond. This clock speed is also referred as clock rate. Clock speed is referred as clock rate. Next is bandwidth. Bandwidth is the number of bits processed in a single instruction. Means how many number of bits you can process in a single instruction. 8-bit, 4-bit, 16-bit. How many bits you can process in single operation, single instruction. That is known as bandwidth. Next is word length. Word length is the number of bits the processor can process at a time. Now, there is a difference. Bits processed in single instruction and bits processed by the processor at a time. Okay, so 8-bit microprocessor may process 8-bit data at a time. The range of word length from 4 bits to 64 bits, depending upon the type of microcomputer. Bandwidth is the space in which the data or the number of bits can be provided to the instruction. Like 8 bit का data provide कर रहे हो, 16 bit का data provide कर रहे हो, कितने bit का आप data provide करो, that is the bandwidth. Okay, but word length is what? Word length is that number of bits that a processor can process at a time, per unit of time. Means एक साथ प्रोसेसर कितना डेटा आपका प्रोसेस कर लेगा. लाइक आपने प्रोवाइड तो किया 16 बिट एक साथ, बिकॉज यू हैव अ 16 बिट बस, तो 16 बिट आपने प्रोवाइड तो कर दिया, बट प्रोसेसर जो है दैट कैन प्रोसेस ओनली 8 बिट. सो द वर्ड लेंथ इज 8 बिट एंड बैंडविड्थ इज 16 बिट. ओके, नेक्स्ट इज डेटा टाइप्स. Processor supports multiple data types like binary, 0-1, ASCII codes, signed, unsigned numbers, hexadecimal numbers, and so on. Okay. Now, working of microprocessor. Microprocessor follows a sequence to execute instructions. You have heard about fetch, decode, and execute. Fetch, decode, execute एक साइकिल है. हर एक इंस्ट्रक्शन fetch, decode, execute से काम करती है. First of all, you need to fetch the opcode, then you have to decode the opcode and find the operation, and according to the operation, the execution takes place. Initially, the instructions are stored in the storage memory of computer in a sequential order. The microprocessor fetches those instructions from the storage area. What does that mean? It means the instructions are already stored somewhere. Like, as I said, sit down. So there is a meaning of this instruction which is already stored somewhere in your memory. And once I set this instruction, the meaning of this particular instruction is fetched from your memory. आपके दिमाग से इसका मतलब निकाला गया. Sit down. What is the meaning of sit down? Okay. You got that meaning, you decoded it, and then you executed it. Okay. Now read this once. The microprocessor fetches those instructions from the stored area, then decodes it and executes those instructions till stop instruction is met. Stop, or we can say that halt. Stop or halt. These are the instructions which terminates the program. Then it sends the result in binary form to the output port. Okay. After execution, if there is any output, then the output is transferred to the output port. Between these processes, the register stores the temporary data. Okay, like R1, R2, R3, these are the registers. So they can store any intermediate data, any temporary data if required, and ALU, that is arithmetic and logic unit. This performs the computing functions. If there is any addition, subtraction, logical and or any kind of operation is there, then ALU will perform that operation. Next is features of microprocessor. Now, what are the basic features or advantages of microprocessor? First, low cost. What is the meaning of low cost? As due to integrated circuit technology, IC. Integrated circuit means IC. Due to IC technology, microprocessors are available at very low cost. If you talk about 8085 microprocessor, only processor, it is like इस तरह का कुछ IC होता है ये, okay, and it will cost around 60 rupees, 60 rupees only. So you can have this microprocessor at very low cost. Now 60, or if we talk about i3, i5, i7 processor, so according to their performance, their cost is very low. Let this processor is around thousands of rupees, okay, but thousands of rupees and their comparative performance is very cheap, okay. Next is high speed. Processor processes at very high speed. Processes means work. Microprocessor can work at very high speed, means millions of instructions per second, and this is known as MIPS, millions of instructions per second. Millions instructions per second. Next is small size processor. As I told you that this is the size of the processor. Okay. So processor is fabricated in very less footprint. Footprint is just a phrase, okay, due to very large scale and ultra large scale integration technology. Integration means again IC. Because of this, the size of computer system is reduced. Earlier we have a computer of room size, but now you have a mobile device in your hand that contains the processor. Means the size of computer reduced from a room size to palm size. एक कमरे के साइज से लेकर आपके हथेली के साइज में आ गया है कंप्यूटर. दैट मीन्स यू हैव रिड्यूस्ड साइज ऑफ योर कंप्यूटर. नेक्स्ट इज वर्सेटाइल. वर्सेटाइल मीन्स दैट कैन चेंज, ओके, और दैट हैज फ्लेक्सिबिलिटी. द सेम चिप मीन्स प्रोसेसर. चिप का मतलब क्या? प्रोसेसर की बात हो रही है. It is used for several applications. Several applications means it can use for addition, multiplication, division. Nowadays, अगर आप latest computers की बात करते हैं, then those computers can use for internet surfing, for downloading, for songs, games, movies, videos, applications, and etc. etc. So we can say that the microprocessors are very versatile in nature, as they can be used in many applications at the same time. Next is low power consumption. Microprocessors are using metal oxide semiconductor technology. Metal oxide semiconductor means it is known as MOSFET. The meaning of MOSFET is metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. Apart from MOSFET, we have TTL, CMOS. These two technologies are used. Earlier we used TTL technology, transistor logic. Then the updated technology was complementary metal oxide semiconductor. Complementary metal oxide semiconductor. This is based on MOSFET technology. So CMOS technology is very power efficient, also very fast as compared to TTL. So microprocessors are CMOS based. Their architecture is CMOS based, means metal oxide semiconductor technology based, which consumes less power. If we talk about TTL, then it consumes like 12 volt. So CMOS consumes 3 volt. Now see the difference in the power consumption. Next is less heat generation. Microprocessor uses semiconductor technology. Semiconductor means PN junction. Okay. Semiconductor technology which will not emit much heat as compared to vacuum tube devices. Earlier, the room-size computers uses vacuum tubes, and these devices generate so many heat. But semiconductor technology, that is PN junction, your diode, you have heard about diode, transistor. So these technologies doesn't generated much heat. So the microprocessor are less in heat generation as well. And last is reliable. Since microprocessor use semiconductor technology is very reliable. The chances of failure is very less. The chances of failure is very less. So we can say that the microprocessors are very reliable rather than the previous versions. Now, evolution of microprocessor. Evolution means how microprocessor developed, from where microprocessor development has started, in which year, and etc. etc. So here we have a table. The first microprocessor was 4004. I have told you just that Intel developed 4004 microprocessor in 1971. The word length is 4-bit. Memory addressing capacity is 1 KB, 16 pins. First of all, there is no need to learn this table. Okay? You don't need to learn this table. You need to just understand this. Now how? Understanding और learning, there's a difference. आपको ये सारी की सारी टेबल और एंट्रीज याद नहीं करनी है. जस्ट आपको पता होना चाहिए कि 4004 means what, 8085 means what, 8086 means what. This table doesn't contain every microprocessor, but this table contains the most popular or main processors that developed by Intel. Okay. One more thing. This table is only about Intel microprocessor. Now, the processor 4004 having the clock frequency of 750 kilohertz. 750 kilohertz is very less as compared to your today's processor. Today's processors are like 2.4 gigahertz, 4.2 gigahertz. The memory is like 4 GB, 8 GB, 16 GB. Memory means RAM की बात हो रही है. Okay, main memory. We don't talk about auxiliary memory or secondary memory here. And it can process 64-bit data. जो latest है तो 64-bit का प्रोसेसर है ये, और स्टार्ट कहाँ से किया था, 4-bit से. ओके. 1971 में पहला प्रोसेसर बना, एंड आफ्टर दैट 1976 में बना 8085. It takes up to 8-bit and the memory can be up to 64 KB. 40 pins are there. The clock frequency varies from 3 megahertz to 6 megahertz. Clock frequency means on what speed the processor executes. This is the frequency and it can be provided using crystal oscillator. Oscillator एक component होता है जिसको processor के साथ connect करके हम oscillations और clock frequency generate करते हैं. Okay. Next is 8086. This developed in 1978. It's a 16-bit processor. The memory can be up to 1 MB, 1 megabyte. The RAM, 1 MB RAM. Okay, 40 pin, 528 megahertz. Next is 80286. It developed in 82. It is also 16-bit. The memory is from 1 MB to 16 MB or 4 GB in virtual. Means secondary memory को जो virtual memory, जो concept of virtual memory you have studied, so that was implemented here. So 4 GB virtual memory can be connected with the 80286. 68 pins and up to 12.5 megahertz. 386 is developed in 85. It is 32-bit processor, 4 GB RAM and 64 TB virtual memory. TB, terabyte. It is a 132 into 14 by 14 PGA. PGA stands for pin grid array. It is like this. It is a square shape, and in square shape these are the pins. Okay, this structure is known as PGA, pin grid array. Okay, so total 14 rows and 14 columns, each contains 132 pins. Okay, and clock frequency is up to 33 megahertz. Next is 80486. It was developed in 1989. It is again 32-bit, 4 GB real, 64 TB virtual, but number of pins have been upgraded from 132 to 168, 14 by 14 to 17 cross 17. Rest everything is same. Number of pins have been increased. The clock frequency have been increased 33 megahertz to 100 megahertz. Now, the more, the greater clock frequency gives you the faster execution. Okay. Then Pentium has launched in 1993, 32-bit processor, 4 GB RAM, 32-bit addresses, and 64-bit data bus. Now you can process 64-bit data, but the processor is of 32-bit, so it can process 32-bit data at once, but the data bus can travel 64 bits. Total 237 pins in PGA format, 200 megahertz clock frequency. Next is Pentium Pro 95, 32-bit, 36-bit address bus, 64 GB RAM, 387 PGA, 200 megahertz is the frequency. In the same, Pentium 2 was 400 megahertz, Pentium 3 was 1.3 megahertz, 600 to 1.3 megahertz, 600 megahertz to 1.3 gigahertz आएगा, sorry. Okay, तो 600 megahertz से 1.3 gigahertz तक जाएगा, like this. Pentium 4, again same, only the number of pins have been increased in Pentium 3 and Pentium 4. Rest everything is same. Then Itanium series, which I have told you, the I series, i3, i5, i7 processors that invented in the year 2001. But in India, we have received this around 2010. In India, in market, it comes around 2010. It was invented in 2001. Later on, the testing and availability, US market में पहले available होगा, then इधर, etc. etc. Itanium series 64-bit का word process, 64-bit का address line, 64-bit का data line, 423 pins का pin grid array architecture, speed up to 1.3 gigahertz. The first Itanium processor. Later on, ये i3, i5, i7, second generation, 10th generation, latest is the 11th generation. So, according to the generation wise, this clock frequency have been increased. The latest one is known as i5. If we talk about i5 processor, then i5 processor 11th generation is the latest one, which works on 4.2 gigahertz quad core processor architecture. Each is having 2.4 gigahertz frequency. Each processor having 2.4 gigahertz processing speed, and there is a quad core architecture, means 4 processor can be implemented, yeah, 4 core can be implemented as together. There are some short forms like PGA, that is pin grid array, MMX multimedia extension, SIMD single instruction multiple data, ALU arithmetic logic unit, FPU floating point unit, which is mentioned in this remarks column. So this was all about the evolution of microprocessor from 1971, 4-bit processor, from 1971, 4-bit processor to 2001 Itanium series. This was all about for today's lecture.
Well, this is all for today. Thank you very much for your patience listening. Please feel free to ask for queries. You can find our contact information in the description box just below the video. Thank you once again. Have a nice day. Thank you.